The team of diplomats were on their way to Volcar, a system also controlled by House Strako, but this time they didn't want House officials to know about it. Kex, the Aporo-Lanan father they had rescued from Louvria, had promised to show them how to find the Lost Fleet, a legendary group of capital ships that went missing 100 years ago. He had learned about the pirate Pedok, who had commanded the fleet, when reading stories to his son. Then he had found further information in the study of his master. Night after night, after everyone went to bed, Kex had sneaked into the study and read more and more about this fleet. In doing so, he believed he had narrowed down its final resting place. That place was not Volcar. However, it was in a place that was inaccessible without the Medallion of Talab. Kex had learned that Pedok's lover had been named Talab, and he was buried with a medallion on Volcar. Since that time, over-industrialization on the planet by House Strako back when they owned the planet had changed the climate and made the area where he was buried a desert. Recently, Kex had learned that mining on Volcar had uncovered a tomb in the same area where Talab was buried. He was certain the medallion would be inside it. Eshka was looking up information about Volcar while Kex told Hefla the information. He learned that the area where they would be going was sulfurous with heavy winds. Though the air was breathable, it was difficult, and thus no living slaves were used on the planet, only droids. Viv sat in the hull with Raka. The two of them did their work on Joe, piecing it together so it could walk and talk on its own. It couldn't do much else yet, but it would do for the moment. Sorve sat in the cockpit with Jahat. Without much to do as a pilot at the moment, Jahat kept eyeing Sorve suspiciously. "Is everything okay?" Sorve asked. "Just making sure you're not going to stab me in the back," Jahat said. "You're a whole kind of extra, aren't you?" Sorve said. "I don't want to get trapped again." "Is that why you joined the rebellion?" "The Empire set up my community. Promised them riches if we helped them establish a base on our world. They used it as a jumping-off point to trap us. I'm the only one that got away." "That sounds familiar," Sorve said. "What'd they do to you?" Shahad asked. "Blew up my whole community. The whole town I was from. It had been a clear day, so we saw the Star Destroyers appear out of hyperspace above. Seemed like no big deal. We had heard that some people had complained about their style of leadership, so we thought they'd be sending someone down to investigate. But then, boom." "That's bullcrap," Jot said. "Where did it sound off? Did I go too far with the whole town blowing up?" "The whole thing stinks of a lie. I know when..." One of the controls began to beep, and Shahat sat up and flipped some switches. The spinning vortex of hyperspace was replaced with an orange-brown planet. The surface was shrouded from eyes and sensors under swirling clouds of dust and sulfur. Hefla and Eshka came to the front and they worked out a plan. Hefla suggested that, since they were in an Imperial shuttle, they should come in claiming to be Imperials on an inspection. "But the Imperials are keeping their hands off House Strako," Eshka said. "They're supposed to be keeping their hands off," Hefla said. "This helps us in two ways." "I like the way you're thinking," Sorve said. "It's a trick," Shahad exclaimed. "We don't have any Imperial uniforms," Eshka said, "and none of us are human." "Tell them we'll be landing near the excavation site," Hefla said. "Don't ask, tell." Sorve used his most authoritative voice to the managerial droid. The droid was not intimidated, but it did take Sorve at his word. Sorve provided a plethora of detail, including the ship, designation, his name and operating number, the type of inspection they were making, and how long it would take. And most importantly, he provided a mission title and objective that all sounded important. Most of all, there was no discussion to be had. The droids would remain clear of their inspection and not interfere. The managerial droid said affirmative, and they went in for a landing. "Let's do this quickly, everyone," Hefla said. "Eshka, you stay here with Kex to protect the ship and his family. We will check out this tomb and will hopefully be back with the medallion in no time." "Do we need spacesuits?" Raka asked. "Just don't be outside too long," Jad answered. Raka and Hefla led the way out the ramp and over the sand dune. The wind was biting at their faces, and they regretted not having at least scarves and goggles. Ahead of them, they could just make out occasional pieces of structures and bits of droids left abandoned, like junk sticking out of the sea. At the opposite end, a cave entrance yawned open past a few droids going about their work. "Don't disturb any of the droids," Hefla shouted over the wind, and she pushed forward. The others followed her down into the crater. They all did as she said, staying clear of the droids as best they could. They lumbered along, minding their own business. Viv started toward one of them curiously, and Sorve had to grab him and pull him along to keep him focused. Hefla was surprised to find stairs which led to a platform inside a wide-open chamber. This tomb was far more elaborate than she had expected. On the platform was a spider droid digging into the wall and a gonk droid that scooped up the wall debris and carried it upstairs to the outside. Everyone again avoided the gonk droid, and they looked further into the dark chamber. They had to stop at the edge lest they drop into a pit filled with acid. Hefla pulled out a light and illuminated the large chamber. Across the river of acid, 2 rows of pillars marched to the tomb. Stairs led up to the sarcophagus, which lay beyond a skull carved into the floor. "Lovely, friendly place," Sorve quipped. "I think it's a..." Jahat started. "Wonderful vacation home? I know," Sorve finished. "The place looks cursed," Raka said. "You don't believe in curses, do you?" Viv asked. "If you believe in the Force, why not a curse?" Raka asked. "Whatever it is, we need to get to the other side and take a look." "Looks like we'll have to jump," Raka said, referring to the broken pieces of the bridge. "That would be dangerous for most of us," Hefla said. "Anyone who falls in that acid would be..." They heard a cracking of metal, a grunt, then the whining of machinery. They looked over to see Jahat on top of the spider droid. He had rewired it and had a hand inside its head, moving it like one drives a vehicle. He had it crawling toward the other broken bridge. "You're going to fall in!" Raka began to yell at him, but Jahat stopped the mechanism, had it reach one leg over at a time, and dig into the stone on both sides. Once it was done, he froze it in position. "It's a bridge!" Jahat shouted. Everyone else went to his bridge and used the droid to climb over. When the last person had come over, Jahat had it move again, climbing onto the tomb side. They walked up the first layer of steps, and Hefla was about to step onto the second layer, but Raka stopped her. "I suspect..." he started to say. Jahat interrupted, saying, "It's literally a trap! Step aside!" The other 2 did, and Jahat's spider droid moved up to the steps, pulled its rear legs close, then leaped its front legs up to the top, once again creating a bridge. And the player lifted a giant middle finger to the Game Master as he undid all his dungeon crawl traps with a single worker droid. Raka and the 2 Mon Calamari used the droid as a bridge to go to the upper platform. There they looked the sarcophagus over carefully. Kex had described the emblem of the pirate, and it matched what they were seeing on either side of the stone covering. The 3 stepped up carefully to it. They looked it over, certain it would have... Raka and Hefla looked over at Jahat, waiting for him to say it. He said nothing. He glanced over at them and said, "What are you doing, you weirdos?" "Go ahead and say it," Raka said. "Get it over with," Hefla added. "Say what?" Jahat asked. "It's..." Raka said. Hefla said. "Sarcophagus?" Viv and Sorve strolled around the back chamber. Sorve spotted another stone coffin and approached it. Viv became curious about other rooms beyond. However, a pool of acid sat between him and the next room, so he had to climb the wall to get to it. Viv was no athlete, but lucky for him, the wall was ragged and... One foot slipped. The tip of his shoe met the acid, and part of it was eaten away. He pulled up his leg, then leaped onto the opposite side. Looking down, he could see his toes now sticking out of his shoe. Looking up, he spotted a plain sarcophagus ahead. In the main chamber, Raka had looked all over and found nothing suspicious. "It should be safe," he said. So the 3 operatives grabbed the lid and pulled it up, and it fell on the other side. "Told you there's no trap," Jahat said. Hefla sighed and looked inside. A well-adorned skeleton was there, and around his neck was a medallion with a symbol from the lid. Raka looked closer, searching for some form of trap. This seemed all too easy, especially for a pirate. But then again, maybe he wanted it to be found. So Raka reached in and carefully pulled it out. In the back chamber, Viv also tried to see if he could find any traps. He couldn't, so he lifted the lid. Inside, he found another well-dressed skeleton, also with a medallion. He reached in and took it, realizing after he had it that he perhaps should have been more careful in case there was a trap. That's when he needed his friend Jahat with him. Suddenly, the sound of metal feet clattering down the stairs echoed through the chamber. The Mon Calamaris and Raka looked over to see battle droids entering and looking around. The rebel operatives took cover. They could not be seen by Strako droids. If they were, the whole alliance with House Strako would be broken. The battle droids took position along the platform. Loud clanking sounded behind them. Then it became clear what it was. Droidicas were bouncing down the steps. They rolled across the platform, then unfolded and raised their shields. Sorve hurried to the front, carrying a weapon he had found. "What is that?" Rocka asked. "Won't know until I pull the trigger," Sorve said. "You think it'll still work?" Hefla asked. "We'll see," Sorve said. "It's a trap," Shahat said. Viv nervously made his way back around the corner, but had no problem this time since he knew what the footholds were. He came up behind the others, who weren't sure what to do. "Maybe they haven't seen us yet," Hefla whispered. "Surrender and come out with your hands up," one of the droids demanded. "Screw this," Shahat said, and he manipulated some of the machinery in the mining droid. A cutting laser fired from it and he steered it to the side. It cut 2 of the droids in half. Hefla opened fire as well, hoping that by destroying them all here, they wouldn't report who they were. She damaged one droid's leg, and it fell into the acid, melting away. The droids opened fire. The droidicas peppered the mining droid and hit Shahat, who fell back. Viv ran up and used a stim-pack on him, relieving him enough to survive, but not feeling so great. Rocka tossed a grenade at the droidicas. It overloaded their shields and took them down, but the droidicas themselves were still up and turning toward him. "Time to find out what that weapon does," Rocka said. Sorve pulled the trigger in the direction of the droidicas. Huge flames came out and enveloped the large robots. Within seconds, they had melted away.
I like it!
The remaining droids fired, but missed, as they always had, and started to back out. Hefla chased after them, shooting one of the droids down, but the last one got away. "We have to get that droid," Hefla said. Rocka ran after it. Not waiting for the portable bridge, he leaped over the divide and kept running. By the time they were crossing, Rocka was at the entrance. He spotted the droid in the pit. It had stopped and was concentrating. Rocka knew that meant it was transmitting something. He shot it quickly, and hoped it hadn't sent too much information. He shouted to the others to hurry. They needed to get to the ship before reinforcements arrived. Hefla called to Eshka and told him to have the ramp lowered. She wanted him to fly the ship to them, but he was afraid he might crash it in the heavy winds. Rocka went about destroying every droid in the crater. They couldn't have any witnesses. Viv scooped up the pieces of the droids as they went, much to the others' consternation. He was far behind them as they made their way up the crater. By the time they were boarding the ship, shadows of a dozen or more droidicas rolling toward them could be seen. "Viv, get in here!" Rocka shouted. "Bring the ship to me," Viv said. "Drop the damn droid pieces," Rocka shouted into his comm. "He won't make it in time," Eshka said, watching the droids rolling at them. "I got this," Shahat said, sitting at the controls. "Leave the door open." The shuttle launched and rose up over the sand dune. Viv was on the opposite side near the bottom with a pile of metallic pieces. The winds bashed at the ship, but that wasn't a problem for Shahat. He could never keep up with the others in a space battle, but navigating unruly atmospheres, that was his specialty. The shuttle lowered into the crater and the landing platform dropped in front of Viv. He hurled droid pieces inside, and Rocka caught them. After 3 loads, he shouted, "That's enough! Grab my hand!" "One more!" Viv shouted, and he hurled it inside. The droidicas were flying up over the sand dunes now and dropping toward Viv. He jumped on board the ramp and it began to close. The droidicas unfolded as they landed. Some of them fell over from their momentum, others sank, and still others didn't get unfolded and wheeled to the opposite side of the crater. The pair that did land right fired up at the ship, damaging its underbelly but not doing enough to bring it down. Shahat got out of the atmosphere and shot into hyperspace. While the diplomats were on this mission, other battles were taking place across the sector. To watch any of these other battles, click on the corresponding image. If you'd rather skip ahead, select the last box. Thank you all for watching, and may the Force be with you.